We'll see you.
Yeah.
9 o'clock coffee.
Yeah.
I was just saying hi.
What?
I was just saying hi.
I know, I said hi. Yes.
Okay. It's 7:01, and I'll call the July 18th, 2023 meeting of the White Bear Lake Conservation District Board to order. We have a roll call quorum. We have a quorum. Thank you, everybody. Okay. We're called to order. The next item is approval of agenda. And before we get to that point, I attended the City of White Bear Lake council meeting the other night, and they do some things that I think would benefit us. So I would like to ask members if we could start to function in a slightly different way. And that is that when we're having discussion, rather than people kind of getting excited and talking over each other and not letting, and maybe having a little too much chaos, if it would be okay if we just speak in turn, and I'll recognize you, we'll all get a chance to speak, but it might make the process a little easier and more respectful for everybody. So that's what I'd like to ask. And then I'm also going to make a slight change, and I will say I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as an example, and then let whoever is feeling it make the motion. So, assuming that's okay with everyone?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
I'm going to be really bad at it. How would you just want us to raise our hand, or how do you want to?
That'd be great.
Just to start.
Yep.
And then when I get out of turn, just put your finger on your nose. Go, Chris.
Yes. Okay. Thanks for that question. But yeah, if you just raise your hand, I'll recognize you. And Chris, you might want to move your mic. Okay. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Do we have a second? Okay. Second just came before the motion. Thank you. Okay. And we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion on the agenda? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. We have approved agenda. The approval of the previous board meeting minutes. I will entertain a motion to approve those.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Any discussion, any changes anybody would like to make to those minutes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Public comments? Okay. I don't think anybody's here to take advantage of that tonight, but typically we allow 15 minutes at our meetings for items that are not on the agenda. But seeing no one here to take advantage of that, we will move on. New business. Enforcement in Commercial Bay. So there are a couple of things, and both of these, one of them will come up in the LUC committee report, and that was a violation that we received word about of multiple boats tying up on the Tallies dock that was inhibiting someone from the adjacent the docks of White Bear from transiting safely out of their slip. And we were informed by the Ramsey County Sheriff that in that situation that people who notice that can call him directly, and Sherry has that number. And is it also reasonable that they could just call 911 if they don't get I think that's also reasonable, that they could call 911 if they don't get the sheriff.
Emergency, probably.
Yeah. And is it a different number when it's a non-emergency?
It's not, it's 911, you say it's a non-emergency and ask for a call for service.
Yep. So if anybody sees that situation and is interested in reporting it, that's how you would do it. If anybody raises a concern about that, then that's how we will advise them. Additional enforcement in Commercial Bay. We have an operator that's operating without a permit, and I think that the option that we have available to us is to have our council write a complaint, a formal complaint, and we can write that daily if we wanted to. Okay, so that's that's an option. And Susie, do you have something to add to this?
Yeah, I was wondering, isn't there a $700 fine per boat regarding the fact that they don't have an application, they don't have a permit? There is, when my dock was out of order, according to this council, I was threatened with a $700 fine per day. Is there nothing that we can do? I mean, we are writing letters, we are telling them no, but they're not doing anything, and it's clear that they're not too concerned. There's no one present here. They haven't made an application yet. It is now July 18th. I mean, soon the end of the season will be over, and they will not have paid a dime for having their docks in the lake. Mm-hmm. I mean, a slap on the hand every day seems kind of ridiculous to me.
I think that's the mechanism that we have in front of us, and I think it would be per violation, and I think in this case the violation would be operating without a permit, so it would be a single violation each day.
And how much would that entail?
Alan, what are the potential consequences?
Yeah, I think the last time when we were going through the ordinances, did we update it to 1,000?
I think we did. It went from 700 to 1,000, I believe.
The misdemeanors are what they are, basically. It's no greater than that, so there's no escalator. And so each violation, or at least each complaint, would be as a misdemeanor level. So maximum fine in that case, is $1,000.
So they could be issued that on a daily basis when a complaint is given.
Right. It's not as simple as just writing a ticket. So it's a lot of work to actually make formal complaints. So to do that every day would be quite an administrative process. So,
okay, Mark.
So, looking at Ordinance 15, I think that's the enforcement ordinance. It seems like there's two paths. There's criminal and civil. We're choosing the civil path?
Well, that would be in criminal court. So you could take the civil path as well. So.
Do we need to declare?
The last time we did this with the sheriff's department was to get Ordinance 5 basically into the system so it could be a criminal citation. So it would be handled through criminal court. And so if I did it as a formal citation or formal complaint instead of just a ticket that you would get when you get pulled over in your car, it would be the same process, same level of criminality. It would go through the same channels. It's just a different way of presenting it into the court system.
And what's being proposed
is that.
Criminal. Okay.
Chris?
And we're doing this because the sheriff doesn't want to enforce it, correct?
We were informed that they would not issue citations.
Right. So we can't get the sheriff to enforce it, so this is the route we're going to try to enforce it.
Well, I haven't been directed to do it, but that's the other route.
So if you go this route, so it's the same thing. You can get a misdemeanor, you can get the same, I guess, effect. It's just longer.
It's the exact same process. It's just a different way to get there. So you can walk to court or you can run to court. And so the citation is just faster because if you get pulled over, you get the ticket right there. Yeah. You know, that sheriff's deputy who pulls you over could just take in the evidence and hand it off to a prosecutor, and they could just send you something in the mail 2 weeks later with the same exact information.
So. Do they get enforced any different, like compared to a sheriff, or it's all the same thing?
Because it's still just an allegation.
The sheriff doesn't want to do the work. We're doing the work, basically, we're saying.
The complaint is emanating from a different source. So when the sheriff goes out there and says, hey, do you have a permit? And they say, no, here's your ticket. You say to me, hey, they don't have a permit. And so the district is then formally complaining on its own. So like I said, you get to court the same way. It's the exact same charge.
Just wish the sheriff could do it.
We met with them, and there was not much appetite for doing that as a citation. So if you want, I'm not the chair, so if you want to elaborate on what the rationale was, we ran it up the flagpole anyway, so that's what we were told.
Well, I think that complaint needs to include the fine.
Well,
They have no
choice.
motivation to do anything at this point.
Well, it's charged as that, so the maximum fine is what it is. So it goes into the system as a misdemeanor, and so it's not called out by anyone specifically. It's just that's what that level of crime in Minnesota is charged at. So if it was a petty, like if you went and got a speeding ticket, that's never going to be more than $300, and a misdemeanor is never going to be more than $1,000. Gross misdemeanor is never going to be more than $3,000, and so on and so forth on up the chain up to a felony.
But what I'm saying is the complaint should include the fact that they are being fined $1,000.
They aren't being fined. They're being charged with a misdemeanor, and if found guilty, they can be fined up to $1,000. So
So the
that's way it
complaint would
works.
include that.
Just like the citation would.
Okay.
Yeah.
Scott?
We haven't received any permit fees from them, have we?
Not a cent.
No permit fees from them.
Okay, and that would be, what, $75 times 240 or whatever?
The number
Would
is.
be like 18,000.
We received $75.
The application fee,
Yes,
not a unit fee, though.
Oh,
but we did get the application fee.
Right.
Right. Chris?
But not the overall
No.
bill for all the slips. Like
No.
Because they don't have a
that-
permit.
It's just $75, not the
Right.
260 times 75. Okay.
I'll make a motion that we request Alan to issue this complaint, and I'll just throw a number of 3 times per week until we see an application, a modified application.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Chris?
So if we go 3 times a week, is that a misdemeanor for each one? Mm-hmm. Every one of them? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Darren?
Is every one of them tried in court
Potentially.
separately, or did they lump them together?
No, you're starting 3 different actions every week.
So separately.
Mm-hmm.
So in essence,
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, are you done? So in essence, we're threatening them with a $3,000 fine, and yet if a resident of White Bear Lake does something that is a misdemeanor, we threaten them with a daily fine of $1,000, or a misdemeanor.
I think the potential exists, and I don't understand the law all that well, but I think in this situation, the violation is a daily violation, and so theoretically, I suppose we could do it daily, but my motion is to do it 3 times a week. Alan?
To give you a metaphor that might make more sense than trying to enforce the ordinances and what is this and what is that. Everyone on this board has a driver's license. Fair? Everyone drives every day.
I understand the whole thing.
Right.
I'm just
So-
looking at the
Can
enforcement.
you continue, please?
You get pulled over on a Monday without a driver's license, you get pulled for a medical reason or whatever else, that person can give you a driving after fill in the blank, revocation, suspension, cancellation. It's a misdemeanor. And so you get the ticket, you say, okay, put it in your pocket. The next day you drive to the grocery store and you get pulled over because they run your license and they see that you don't have a license, and they pull you over again, you get another ticket. And so every day that you drive is potentially, and I've seen people get multiple tickets the same day because every driving incident is a separate incident. But we permit things, so every day that you don't have a permit, the logic would be, is a different violation. So could you issue a citation or a complaint every day of the week? Sure. because every day is a new day. So what I'm hearing is the motion and the second is to issue Monday, Wednesday, Friday, start a new court case. And I'll just tell you that that's an administrative burden. So the retainer's small, and so if I have to start trying 3 cases, that's going to get expensive. So the juice is not really worth the squeeze at $1,000 a pop. So, hey.
Chris?
That was my question. What is this cost? Like, if we do this for each one of it, what does that cost us? Like, your fees for the, like, our budget, everything else, what does that impact if we do it three times a week?
Well, the motion was 3 times a week until an application is submitted, not until an application is approved. So I assume that the trigger to stop is Sherry gets an application.
Sure. What's one cost? Like, give me in a ballpark. You said $1,000 per each one?
That would be the fine.
No, I'm saying, like, here, our administrative costs and the things to represent, like, I take it we'd have to go to court and represent it, or how does that, we're going to have time there.
If it goes through this traditional process, the actor, the person who's cited, has a right to a jury trial, right?
Yeah.
And so a jury trial, depending on who wants to parade what witnesses, that could take a couple of days, literally all day, every day for a couple of days.
And what is that additional cost that would cost the board to
I have no idea,
fund that?
because we've never had
Ballpark.
to do that.
It could be 10 grand to 100 grand?
They'd be 10 grand, but could you go through a couple $1,000s of trial? So if you've got
And there would be a
3
trial
trials
per ticket, I take it?
ticket.
Yeah. So we're talking, like, if we run it up in 3 weeks, there's 10 of them, there's 30 grand just like that.
And a very upset counsel for the board.
Yeah, and
I
then
just don't have the time
and
to
one
try 3
last,
cases a week, every week for.
and then one last question: what makes us think that we can enforce it compared to why the sheriff couldn't? From his viewpoint,
Guy.
huh?
And remember, we weren't asking them to try the case. We were just asking them to issue the citation.
Right, but they weren't going to issue it because they didn't think it had merit. It sounds like.
That's I'd leave to the board, chair. He was in the meeting too.
And I don't know. I'm just asking, right?
Yeah, I don't know that it didn't have merit. I think that the concern was that this would be the first time in the state of Minnesota that this has been done.
Yeah.
And I think that because there's a difference in the number of slips allowed by the DNR permit versus our permit, that may have seemed a little troublesome to them. And I think that they just didn't want to get involved at this point. That's my read on it. Chris?
I'm and this is just my concern. Our budget's our budget. Like, 30 grand could be a big dent. I mean, that's a lot of milfoil we could take care of. Where it's like, I think we have to be very cautious about some of these fights we're picking and how much it's going to cost us. And is there other alternatives to, like, get resolution of the permit? Is there other things we can do to try to get there, without doing this? Or, I mean, 3 a week to me, if it keeps going on for 3 weeks, you're going to get up there pretty quick. From my gut, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm more of a math guy, but it's smelling like 3 grand a week in trial could be. Go ahead,
Alan?
I would certainly do everything in my power to aggregate. So if you're charged with the same thing, let's say Monday, Wednesday, Friday next week, I issue formal complaint saying you don't have a permit, you don't have a permit, you don't have a permit, and they all end up in court, I would move to try to consolidate those, because why should a different jury hear the same facts on a Wednesday versus a Friday? So there are some tricks that we can use to kind of use the system more efficiently. But if the other side resists and says, well, no, Wednesday it was sunny and Friday it was cloudy, whatever excuse they have to have a separate deal, those are just the lawyer tricks that can be played. So it's hard to speculate what would happen, because I don't think the system's probably had to digest 3 complaints for the same thing a day either.
Chris?
And does it really matter how many complaints there are? Like, if I let's say we consolidate them, and the judge looks at it, does it matter if I have 1 or 40 in his eyes? Or when he's deciding on it's the same issue?
It would not necessarily be a judge that would decide that.
Or a jury, I
If
guess.
they wanted a jury trial, it would be up to a panel of Ramsey County citizens to decide, did you have a permit or didn't you have a permit? Certainly you can waive that and have a court trial, which means that you'd have a judge and she'd say, did you have a permit or didn't you? So it's the same question, it's just who's going to decide the fact.
Yeah, I just think it looks, if we keep charging over and over and over, it just looks like we're just
Yeah, it
throwing
looks
it,
like piling
instead
on.
of like, okay, how do you figure out how to solve it?
Yeah, we did it actually with a chiropractor in,
Yeah, please.
they're actually in Fridley, who decided to use their reader board as more of a bulletin board than an actual commercial, hey, chiropractic adjustment for $1. It was something political back at the time. And so we ended up issuing citations every day for the better part of a week, and it actually got compliance. They got tired of getting ticket every day, right, having to go to court for it. So it did have its intended effect. But let's just say that the system was not happy having to process the same ticket for essentially code violations every day for a week. So,
Darren.
We're still in discussion, right?
True.
Yeah, I don't think it's, well, if we do have Alan issue a citation, I think we should put a cap on it at some number. Just because past behavior from this group is, I don't think receiving letters is going to motivate them to do anything. And plus putting a cap would limit some administrative expenses. At the same time, $1,000. I mean, maybe if there was another 0 or 2 zeros on that, it'd be worth it to go to a jury and trial and everything. But for $1,000 and the time that we'll spend on him, I know he's good, but it's probably be paying more than that. So one idea, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but we're counting slips. Someone is, maybe not. But we should have some data from this year on slips. And I know they don't have a permit, but is there any way we can, and I think they're over, whether it's 240, 250, or 260, whatever, they're over. Is there any way we've talked about that, for every slip you're over, it's -2 the following year provision?
I think it's less one, but it's for
Whatever.
2 years. Yep.
You get what I'm saying?
Yep.
That would be more of than a $1,000 penalty if that's enforced in 2024, if we can.
right, that's administrative.
So I don't know if that's an option to avoid this, running up legal bills, and maybe do that, but just a thought.
Yeah, good question. And so then a question back is, if an entity operates in Commercial Bay without a permit, and then next year we say, hey, you were operating Commercial Bay with too many slips, and they would say, based on what? We didn't even have a permit. So I wonder if we could enforce in that situation. It's a question. Alan?
It seemed, well, I don't know if Chris wants to, he had his hand up before.
I can go next.
I think the reason that the board actually modified the ordinance to reflect the fact that, $1,000 is not much of a fine for a slip overage. And so that's where administratively we said, hey, instead of just giving you a misdemeanor ticket, we will consequently say, not only do you get whatever you got last year, let's just use docs and 240, right? Next year, you won't get your 240, you'll get 239. To reflect that one over, you just get one less. And so I still think docs has a permit for 240 because that's what was approved back in November, wasn't it?
Except that they didn't meet the contingency requirements. So,
Drawing, right.
So do they really have a permit? Because the permit...
Question.
Right. It seems to me that the permit is issued contingent on these actions occurring. These actions don't occur, therefore no permit is issued.
But that was the number, I guess. Is
True.
Yeah.
Chris?
Yeah, we do not have a permit approved for them. We don't even, so that's where I'm back to we don't even know what the number is in theory, right now.
It was, if they got a drawing in.
60 in the past, but we haven't had a permit after that approved, right?
Mark?
This fact seems important. So was there a conditional approval? Because will they argue that they had some version of an approved permit?
In November, it was approved 240 slips contingent on them being within the 300 feet
And a drone.
and this kind of thing. And they just didn't ever do anything with those contingencies. They just, they didn't meet those contingencies. They just installed their docks. Susie?
I think we should play the IRS. When you owe a tax bill to the IRS, if you filed your taxes or not, you have to pay your amount that is due. So without them having an application that is a definite application at this point, they should be sent a bill for approximately $19,500 for 260 boats at $75 apiece. And then we'd be getting some money, which would substantiate the fact that they indeed did have a contract going.
Yeah. And I think that's...
And I think that would be, I mean, you don't pay your taxes, you have a real problem. You pay your taxes when you make an extension for your taxes, even though your taxes are not done.
Okay. I would like to modify the motion to ask Alan to issue this once per week until we see an acceptable permit. Is that okay with the second? Okay, so then I think what we're getting into, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
I still have one question. Alan, would this ever be settled out of court, this kind of thing? Say they got 2 citations in 2 weeks.
Once it's in process, would it be settled out of court? Arguably, it could. I mean, if I got a call and basically, hey, okay, we get it, and I would probably say something like, call Mark, call Chris, you know, you guys figure it out. And if you can come up with an amicable resolution and one of you said, get it out of court, I always have the power to do that.
So,
Chris?
I think there is a way to, like, not even go to court, right? You could just
yes, there
approve it a
is.
permit, right? You could even approve even what they have today, and then get the permit, get the things, and you could enforce things after that.
Mm-hmm.
Right
Diane?
now, here we'd have to concede everything that we've done this year. Where it's August almost, right?
Basically,
I mean,
August.
you'd get a permit, you get the start, and then you could go enforce what you're getting ready for 2024. But like trying to enforce anything this year, if we can't even get the police to do it, and if it's going to cost us more funds to do it out of our budget, I can't vote to take money out of the conservation district's money to pay for lawyer fees instead of what we should be doing on the lake and paying for things there. I just can't do it.
Darren?
So would we have, under that condition, so let's say we go back and approve what was presented to us in June, 260, or 250, I think. Would we have more leverage with the county sheriff in that situation? Obviously, 250 at 75 is, we can do the math, that's a lot higher number than 1,000. Yeah, what's the status there with enforcement? You know, now if they don't pay that fee, where do we go?
Well, once there's an approved, this would be the way I'd perceive it. Once there's an approved permit, Sherry would turn around and send an invoice, right? Send a bill for whatever that number is times the 75. And so at least then they'd be flying legal. You know, the other obligation I think the board has, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, there's a bunch of paying customers that are enjoying slips. Mm-hmm. So I think the obligation is to them too. So they didn't start this fight. Right. So certainly it has to be taken up with the operator somehow. But the boats are there, the slips are there. That's what's going on, and it's basically August before we get to have this conversation again.
Yeah, and I think the advantage of that, Darren, would be that we could enforce the slip counts then. They requested 250. If we give them the 250 and we do a count and it's 251, then in 2024, I think legitimately we could say, sorry, we gave you 250, you were over by 1. This year we're giving you 240. And the way I think that would have to be is the 240 plus a variance for the other 10. And then I think we would be able to enforce that overage count and the administrative penalty in 2024. Mark?
Yeah, I'll just say I'm in favor of enforcing via complaint up to 3 times a week and making the bet that we would be successful combining those cases. If we were not successful combining those cases, then it sounds like we could withdraw the complaint and avoid the...
Well, remember the motion is for once a week now, not 3 times a week. So that's not really part of this discussion.
Sure.
But it's not really as easy as just saying, now it's done, now it's not done. So if they're in process, they're going to be put into this court system like everything else. So it would be hard to just start bargaining away, well, we'll take 2 away today because of something. So the system doesn't work like that. It gets assigned a judge, it'll be assigned an arraignment date. You know, if they mail in not guilty pleas, then it gets assigned to a pretrial date. So the whole process is one by one by one.
But after the first one, there would be some conclusion.
Not before the next one went out. Not before the next one went out. They probably wouldn't come to court. I mean, the delay is usually somewhere around 3 weeks. And so do the math. So you'll have 9 different cases going potentially before they've had a chance to say guilty or not guilty on even the very first one.
That's at 3 per week.
Alan?
That's at 3 per week.
Do you incur costs prior to that, legal costs prior to that court date? So
do you or who?
The district.
No, I mean, it's a criminal citation, so this body gets the benefit of having that as opposed to starting a civil case, which would cost, even if a city wanted to go in and start something and had to file a civil case, there's a civil filing fee. But in the criminal court, not so much. So,
Alan, do you have to, you can issue a complaint without doing anything with the court, can't you, until you issue it to the court or show that you've done that?
we start it, and so I authorize it, I send it in, the court processes it, gives it a case number, and assigns it an arraignment date.
If you don't send the materials into the court,
Yep.
then the court has nothing to do with it.
Nothing happens then either.
No, true. Until I guess I was thinking if you just issue the complaint to them without sending it to the court.
I think I know what you're getting at. And so unlike a civil case where you can actually civilly serve someone, right? If you want to sue someone for, doing something, you can do what's called pocket file. And that means basically you can start an action without filing it into court. They still have to go through all of the motions. They still have to answer you within the time for a civil complaint, but you don't have to start it actually in court.
That's what I was thinking.
The criminal court doesn't work like that. So I can't just say casually, hey, here's your criminal complaint, and not start it in court. That's the difference. They just don't work that way. So it'd be akin to basically giving a warning. If a cop pulled you over and basically said, well, I don't really want you to go to court, but I want you to know that we're logging this, so the next time you do it, you're going to go to court, so here's your warning. That's kind of what we do with these letters, saying, please do what you're supposed to do, right? That's the warning, because we're not going to cite you. We're going to just say, pull your act together.
Chris?
And our goal with this is to try, like right now, is to get a permit so we can enforce things really for the following year, right? We agree on that.
Everyone wants them to have a permit.
Right. We want to get some enforcement so we can get some traction next year, right? Because then we get a permit, we can count, do our things. What's the reality of going through this legal process that would even force, like, it sounds like this is going to be 6 to 9 weeks before anything really maybe comes to fruition, or they could keep pushing it back and appeal it, or what is, like, how long could this get dragged out?
Well, let's just take one instead of 3 or whatever else. Let's just say 1 goes live, all right, and I file it tomorrow. So it'll take a little bit of time to get into the system, and then depending on how many other cases are in the system in Ramsey County, again, the lead time is usually about 3 weeks. And so then it'll be assigned an arraignment date. And so on that date, they come in and they plead not guilty. I mean, there's the potential of saying guilty and just pay the $1,000 and walk away. That's just what they could do. And so if they plead not guilty, now it gets set for a pretrial. You're probably looking at another couple of months out. And if they maintain that not guilty plea and set it for a jury trial, that could probably be another 2 months out. So what is that? Upwards of end of the year to get to a jury trial?
Yeah. I think that part of the question is we have a mechanism to enforce our ordinances, and do we want to use that mechanism or not? Diane?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering, Alan, what do you think is the best course of action?
Well, I think you've got two different tracks. You've got the permit track, which would be next year's consequence for going over, but it's hard to say where you're over when you don't have a permit to say that you're over on. So I think it helps the board and it helps the public to have at least the operator operating with a permit. So the criminal court is really just a big sledgehammer. You know, people get it. I mean, DUIs, you know, people don't stop drinking necessarily because they get a DUI, right? I mean, it's just a clunky way to get people to just do what you want them to do, my opinion. You know, I don't think that I would ever throw someone in jail over a permit thing. So it comes down to whether Docs has a permit or not. Docs pays a fine. No different than when you hear about these companies paying these multi-million-dollar fines for criminal conduct. It's the same thing. The problem is the way we've got this ordinance set up, it's just a misdemeanor. So it's $1,000. So I don't think that that's a very artful way of actually getting where you want to go. So, but I'm always one for negotiation and figuring stuff out instead if we can. So I can do it. I'm just saying that it might not get you where you want to go.
Scott?
Yeah, I'm wondering, you started something there, Brian. You're saying, what if we gave, I mean, they gave us an application for 250 a couple months ago, right? Which was not acceptable to us because it was over 240. Can we give them a permit for 240 and then deal with the other 10 by a variance or something, with the understanding that by October 15th they have to give us an application for 2024, you know, that meets these three conditions? I mean, is that a way we can go forward?
I think that, I think the answer is probably yes. That is a way. I don't know that us telling them that by October you need to provide a permit or a permit application that meets this criteria. I mean, it passed his prologue. You know, they don't care what we tell them. You know, they're just going to do what they do, and they're going to force somebody to tag them out. You know, but I do think there's benefit to the idea of issuing them a permit. You know, the difficulty that I have with their June application is that it was kind of a coordinated dock situation with tallies, and based on the DNR permit for both of those entities, I think the tallies dock could only go out, the DNR permit only allows that dock to go 140 feet, and the application that was brought forward, I think, would have pushed that out closer to 300. So they would have, if we would approve that, we would have, you know, then tallies would have been in violation of their DNR permit, and we would have been granting something that exceeded the DNR permit. And on the Docks of White Bear side, I think that dock, I don't know the numbers exactly, but it's 30, 40, 50 feet is what they're allowed with their northerly dock based on the DNR permit. And so the dock they had shown, or that was included in their application, that was around 300 feet. And so they would have been in violation of that provision of their DNR permit as well. But I mean, maybe we can have this discussion about what if we just issued them a permit for 240 slips with a variance for an additional 10. That would give them the 250 that they requested at the June meeting. But it's possible that they would still operate outside of the 300-foot limit. So we would have to accept that as part of the variance, I think. But that is an option, and it's a question of let's say, just speaking hypothetically, that the board kind of favored that option. So it's not on our agenda. Parties haven't been notified, and I wonder, does that cause us any concern? And do you think that should cause us any concern, Alan?
The way to do that, I mean, obviously it's not on new business, but Robert's rules would allow you to resurrect the vote from last month. I don't remember who voted against the last motion. I think.
Well, I voted against it, so use me as an example. Somebody.
Well, I know it's recorded. I just don't. for purposes of this discussion and the way Roberts works, the motion to reconsider has to be made by someone who voted against the motion that failed. And so it's basically, hey, I've changed my mind. I want to go back and revisit that thought and see if something changes. So whoever would have voted nay could actually say, you know, motion to reconsider. We would have to haul up whatever that motion was, and Sherry can probably get back to it.
But that would be for that dock configuration that was associated with that permit application.
Correct. And then you could modify it from there. Say, hey, we took a vote on this. I want to reconsider it. And then everyone would say, okay, let's reconsider it, and then modify accordingly and take a vote.
So it wouldn't have to
re-vote, really.
It wouldn't have to look exactly like the layout that they provided in the June application. It could be more of a general.
Well, you could modify it, and as long as you go through the process and get the second to say, yeah, this is what we want to do. Because you still have the same flexibility that you do as if the underlying motion were on the table. You just bring it back onto the table.
Meredith?
Wouldn't we still have the same problem that we don't have the right diagram and it's contingent upon them submitting the right diagram, or no?
Well, you're manipulating the diagram that you had in June. And it sounds like, I mean, that's part of the problem with having creative solutions like with tallies is, to your point, you know, now we're messing around with dock lengths and whatnot that are set in stone pretty much by the DNR. And you're kind of bumping your heads against the inflexibility that you have because they've already said this is how you have to lay these things out, which is kind of clunky for your purposes when you're getting creative because ADUAs have been modified.
Chris?
But the board does have the authority. They do have the final say above DNR and everybody else.
You could make that argument. I don't think the DNR is going to push back.
Right.
But the point is you're still modifying what's in black
I would
and
agree
white.
with that, but like in the end, with bylaws, all the other things, it says we are the authority of the lake, correct?
You can modify. And I think you have more flexibility with dock placement and length out to whatever your maximums are. I think where you run into trouble would be actually authorizing more slips than what the DNR authorizes. Because that's what their big North Star
But I
is.
don't think we'd go above 260.
Correct.
Right.
So everything else that you're working within your box, I think it'd be easy to apologize for and say, look, we have these operators agreeing to this, so that's what we did.
Yeah, I think the difficulty I have with that personally is that the board has historically always taken the position that we can give less than the DNR allows, but we can't give more. And I think that's a precedent that has served us well. You know, if we, let's say, just again, hypothetically speaking, the DNR comes back next year with 240 slips for docks of White Bear. It wouldn't be out of character maybe for someone to come in and say, yeah, I see that, but you guys exceeded this last year, so we want you to give us 250 or 260. And so I think that adhering to that precedent of giving up to but not more than the DNR allowed I think that's a precedent that the board, I think that would be a good precedent for the board to keep. Now, with that said, currently, it's likely that they have 260 plus slips installed at Docks of White Bear. Just based on the photo from last year, they certainly had at least 260 and more than that, I think, of slips installed. So if we did make a motion similar to last month to allow 240 plus a 10 boat variance to get them up to the 250 they requested, they can live with that many slips within and not modify their dock arrangement, because they have more than that out there right now, if that makes sense. So it doesn't get us to the finish line we want to get to, which is to have those parties cooperate along their ADUA, but at least it gets us to a solution where they could meet the requirement of 240 plus 10, so a total of 250, and not adjust their docks. Chris?
Well, and I think it just gets you to the goal of getting a permit. I don't think this late in the season to try to get docks moved, it's unrealistic. Maybe it was a reality last month if we approved it, but I I don't think anybody's going to do anything where it's like, if we want to get a permit, I think that's the only solution we can do right now.
Well, and I'm not sure Tallies is really on board at the moment either. And
I would think they wouldn't. I think it's going to take some time to get them to the table if we can align it with what we've proposed in the past. I think it's going to take some time to get them to agree, right?
Have Tally,
just a second.
oh, I'm sorry.
Susie?
Has Tally's taking care of their permit, paid their amount that they need to pay for the annual year? So they're not having any difficulty as far as that
I don't think
goes.
any marina in Commercial Bay is having an issue except Docks of White Bear. Okay, let's. Okay, any further discussion of the motion and the second?
I don't know if there was a motion.
There was a motion to ask Alan to.
Oh, sorry, that motion.
Yeah. Yes.
Can you repeat it, please?
The motion would be to ask Alan to issue
One complaint a week.
one complaint each week until we see an acceptable application. Mike?
Is it possible to do the permit like we've just been talking?
It sounds like it is. It sounds like someone that did not vote for, that voted against the motion in June could resurrect that motion that's covered in our meeting minutes from last month. And then if there were a second, then we could have some discussion. And, part of that discussion could be to put some limitations on their docks in some way but at least the motion, I think, would limit to a total of 240 plus 10 slips. Meredith?
Was that the motion at the last meeting? Was it 240 plus 10?
No, it was a total.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, it was a total of 250. But there may be some advantage to the board if that motion were to be for 240 and then plus a variance for 10 for this year, which would be considered maybe a hardship variance to not require boats to be taken out of the water, for the balance of the season, just because this marina operator didn't act properly. Mike?
I think I think the variance might be more like 20 boats, because I think that's what's in the water.
Chris?
And I think it would be a safe bet to do that just to match it up with the DNR permit.
Yep.
And then it sets us up for next year to be able to enforce what we need to enforce. That's my opinion. I do agree with that, Mike.
Mark?
When asked directly, Mr. McGoldrick said they had fewer than 250 rented slips.
Yep. Chris?
And maybe we could figure out what that hardship is and put it, if the motion's resurrected from one of the no's, like if somebody, maybe we put something in the motion where we find out what that hardship is. I don't know. Or we can try 250. But I think first and foremost, if we bring it up, I think we can figure out what that number is that we try with. Right? I agree with you. If you said 250, maybe that's the start.
Mark?
I think there is a significant benefit to going back to the motion from last month and using the permit that was actually submitted by Docks of White Bear Lake.
The application?
The application. Yes, sorry.
That was
Alan?
260.
For what it's worth, it's page 4, about a third of the way through the page in your minutes. But it looks like what was called out was 250 and 300-foot, basically 45-day grace period before enforcing compliance to maneuver whatever docks were in excess of 50, I think it was, or slips that were being used. And so the only thing that would change in terms of the reconsideration would be, instead of calling it out as a permit for 250, what I'm hearing would be the alteration would be 240 with 10 as a variance.
And in addition,
whatever the length is that's needed.
Right, and in addition, it wouldn't, that motion wouldn't allow those docks to be butted up against each other.
Right.
Chris?
Because we basically don't have like that permit would not be, I don't think any party would say that permit's like a valid thing for us to vote on. I think, you know what I mean? I think we have to do our best judgment on.
The application, you're saying?
Or the application, I'm sorry. The application, we don't know if they even would want that format anymore, right? So in my head,
It would exclude the
it would exclude the
tallies.
permit. It would be like, here, you're leaving things as is. You're going to this X number of boats to enforce a permit so we can enforce things next year.
And maybe the artful way to do it is just simply say to authorize in July the layout of the docks as they lay, right, to support the 250 boats.
Except that the difficulty with that is that they exceed the 300 with several of their docks.
And that's where the variance comes in. You're just blessing what's there.
Question?
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Diane?
Thank you. I would like to see if they do have 240 plus 20, I would like to see us collect for the extra 20, not extra 10.
Do we not also have a overdue collection for the summer of 2022 when they had more boats than they were permitted?
I think that's a separate but valid issue. Chris, did you have anything?
No, I'm good.
Meredith?
So in the past, when we've let the commercial docks go over 300 feet, we've had to publish that we have a variance coming up in front of the board to the public. Would we have to do that? A variance to our ordinance of 300 feet. We published that in the past, I believe, when we let all the commercial docks go above in maybe 2021.
If that's where they are, because certainly what was contemplated was bringing them, back to 300? I think that was the discussion last month.
The motion that was made, just for information here, the vote was called to approve the permit application of 250 boats and docks under 300 feet with 45-day grace period before enforcing compliance of the permit.
That's what I read too. That's what's on page 4.
Yep. Sherry?
Would we not have to notify adjoining property owners 2 weeks before a vote like this would have to take place, or even give them some kind of notice?
It seems like that would be in line with what we have historically done.
That's the process.
Is it possible there could be a special meeting to give property owners a notice on this?
Certainly, that's a possibility. Mike?
Were they notified the first time around?
I'm sorry, what?
Were the adjoining property owners notified the first time around?
Yes.
Were there any complaints?
No.
What about White Bear, the city of White Bear?
Just a second. Nobody expressed concern.
I'm not quite sure right now.
Okay. Chris?
What are you saying the first time? Are you saying, like, because there's the one that was in the winter and then we had a second time? Yeah, last month, I think we had everybody on the same page from last month, 100, yeah.
Okay, well, just to, okay, well, here's what I'll do. I'll withdraw my motion to request that Alan issue the complaint. Diane, are you interested or willing to withdraw your second?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so that motion's off the table. I'll make a new motion that we issue a permit to docks of White Bear Lake for 240 slips, and that we include that we also issue variance for 10 additional boats to get them to the 250 that they had requested in June, and that the docks need to be under 300 feet with a 30-day grace period. That's the motion. We have a motion and a second. Let's have some discussion. Chris.
I have a really hard feeling that they're going to rip off the ends of their docks with the people on it. I don't think it's realistic. This is if I were to change the motion, I would just say leave the docks in place, go to 250 and see where that takes us. I think that's going to be the best thing that you can bring people to the table on it. if we have them change right now, this late in the game, I don't think it's going to be realistic, and it's going to be a legal fight after it.
Any other discussion? Mike.
I agree with Chris. I don't think if we limit them this year, and they'll just stonewall it. If we do the 260, it should be like a motion for 240, vote on it, pass it, then come back with another motion for a variance at $60 cost for 20 additional boats for this season only. In the initial motion, it should say that 240 is what, we will approve on a regular basis, and that next year, start putting together your dock configuration that was submitted at your June 1st application.
Alan, is it acceptable to combine the motion to the 240 plus the 10 boat variance, or should those be separate motions?
I guess it'd be a little cleaner to do it as separate motions.
Okay, so I'll modify.
240 is what you want the permit to be, and so then you get a chance to call out the conditions for the variance while you're doing it, and you can combine them, sure. But I mean, I think it'd be a cleaner conversation about the reason for the variance if it was considered separately.
Okay, so I'll revise my motion to be simply 240 slips, all within the 300 feet, within 300 feet of the ordinary high water, within their 300-foot ADUA. And I don't know who seconded that. Darren, did you accept that as?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the motion. A 240 slip marina within the 300-foot, their 300-foot ADUA. We have motion and a second. Any discussion? Mike?
You're going to make another motion after this one.
I'm sure somebody will.
Okay, I'm ready.
And so that's the motion and a second. Any discussion? Mark?
Clarity, does this go back to their June 1st application at all, or this is an application where we will fill out the drawing, or?
I think we're giving them flexibility by identifying the number of slips and limiting it to 300 feet, and they need to make the decisions they need to make to meet that. And I don't know that we need to identify exactly how long each dock is. I think it's a very reasonable question, but I think that we would just give them the flexibility to adjust as necessary to meet this, the requirements of the motion, of their permit at that point.
And I do think some kind of, like, I'm sorry, I thought you said Chris.
Okay, Chris.
I think it gets very tricky if we don't have a permit, if we're defining things for the owner, right? If it's something that we're defining, like here, we know they need 250. Hey, if you left your docks and it fits there, I can see that going through. But us enforcing a permit that has not been defined, like with their structures and everything that's there and with their input, I think that's hard for a commercial owner to take. I don't think anybody's. I think it's a moot point to even try it if it's not just current state at 250, because you'll just have another battle and it will waste another month and we won't get anywhere. And I don't even know if they'll be on the board for the 250. But if we keep saying here's what you have to do with your docks within your space right now with what they have with the people, I don't think we're going to get buy-in on it, and they'll just stonewall again on it.
I think that there's the possibility that they'll do nothing even if we grant them a permit.
Where it's
but
like
that's what they've done in the past as well.
Do we concede some of this because fine, it didn't get handled and it didn't get voted on. So do we concede on it just to get a permit to have a starting point?
And I think that if the variance is offered up for 10 additional boats within 300, that's in line with the motion of the June motion, and I would say that my read of Mike McGoldrick was that that's what he was asking for, and that as long as we gave them a little flexibility in pulling into 300, that he seemed to be he didn't seem to express any concern about that. Mike,
240 boats could be within 300 feet. And the other ones that we're going to talk about next would be outside of 300 feet. And so that way we get the permit we want, 300 feet, 240 boats. And then the variance adjusts what's in the water now that hopefully will be gone next year, or should be gone next year.
Chris?
But you have to remember, too, the 250 that was put into what was there were based on, you know, the ADUA lines and getting people to agree. Where they're at right now, I don't know if that configuration can fit them in. You know what I mean? Unless you do what you're saying is like leave them the same and it's a variance for the length, too. So that's just my opinion, but Mark may have something different. But I don't know if we don't butt those docks up and do some of that stuff, how you could fit it in personally.
Okay, Mark?
I completely agree with Mike that I think that we do the first one at 240 and 300 feet, and then the variance is as is for the rest of the year. And then we charge them for every boat in that marina.
Yeah, you know, and the concern I have with that is the one that Meredith raised is I wonder if we've given adequate public notice that we intend to offer a variance exceeding the 300 foot. And Alan, can you opine on that for us?
Through your process, no, you haven't. But is there anything that says that you can't just take up the variance next month?
Yeah.
Proper notice and consider it. At least you'll have a permit in place, and no one's jumping the gun to actually enforce the rest of them because you're going to consider the variance next month. I don't know how you honor your process without doing that.
Meredith?
Is there a way to make sure that the docks don't move further towards the neighbors? I don't want that to create another problem with encroachment if they're trying to move their spaces in within 300 feet and they move their docks out horizontally.
Unfortunately, I think the reality is that this group of individuals will do what they want regardless of our ordinance. It's a real sad state of affairs, personally, I think. Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the table, 240 slips within 300 feet, and a 30-day grace period to make that happen. Any further discussion? Susie?
So how does that affect their application next year? Because it sounds like they already have 260 boats out there. Does that mean that the 10 boats that they have above their variance is a negative on their permit for next year? So that instead of having 240 boats, they could only have 230 boats?
No, but I do think
why not?
That if we issue, or if this motion is approved and they have a 240 slip permit within 300 feet, and then next month, just speaking hypothetically, a motion is made and approved that to allow them another 10 or 20 boats as the variance, then I think that caps it at a total of 240 plus 10 or 20, let's just say 20 for talking purposes. Or no, let's say 10 for talking purposes. So 250 total slips, and we go out and count, and they have 252 slips, then I think those two that exceed the total count, then I think, yes, that would count against the slips that they have next year. That's my view of it. You two decide which one. Mark?
Okay, just as far as being equitable, then we should do that same count to all the other marinas, because I think the City of White Bear Lake was 2 over last year because they had the pontoon boat plus that other boat.
The Let's Go Fishing boat.
Yeah.
And then they had the old Johnson.
The old Woody. Yeah, that's over at Allstats now.
Yeah, and I think that...
And I think Tally's was over last year.
And I think that what the position the board has taken is that we're not going to enforce from last year to this year. What we'll do is we'll look at the slip counts for 2023 that were approved, and if they exceed those, that will impact their 2024.
For all marina operators.
Yeah, all of them, of course.
Okay, we're getting off the topic. Let me
But Chris,
can I just make one suggestion? Because it seems like we're forcing it. Like, I mean, it feels weird that we're forcing it where do we need to just follow the process and get to see if these people are on board and see if they even want to do a permit by, let's say, in 2 weeks, right? Because we have to inform the neighbors, we have to do all the right things. And if people don't want to come to the table for maybe the agreement, we say what it is, like 240 plus the 10 and you leave your docks, then go cite them. But I don't know if you come with something that's not palatable or we can get through it, I don't think you're going to get a permit. So do we just shelve this and follow the right process? And then if the process isn't being taken by the individuals, then we go cite?
Well, my opinion on that is that, they won't do anything.
Sure.
I think that the board should take some action. Mike?
That option was offered. Could I read something that may stabilize your letter from the Department of Natural Resources dated May 15th, 2023, from Dan Skolin. Blah, 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 blah. What we informed Mr. McGoldrick that if the city or the White Bear Lake Conservation District authorizes less than 260 slips, the DNR would reduce the authorized number of slips allowed under DNR Public Waters Permit number to be consistent with local permits required by this Minnesota state statute, and it gives 2 statute numbers. Based on the number of slips, 240 officially permitted by the White Bear Lake Conservation District over the past 3 years, the DNR now plans to proceed with reducing the number of slips authorized by DNR permit number blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, but what year?
So we need
I'm sorry.
to have a motion for 240 at 300 feet, and then whatever we do with the variance.
And then we could always take up the variance at the August meeting per Alan, and I think that matches our process. Chris?
But when's that enforced from the DNR? And I know we have the authority, but what's the year, or when does that get?
2024 operating season.
2024. So this year's out of the picture.
Right.
For the DNR permit.
The DNR will modify their, based on that letter, DNR modified their permit through the fall, winter, so that the 2024 operating season is in line.
So it's going to be,
with
it's 260 this year on the DNR permit.
That's correct.
So with that, and like legal messes of one person thinking this or that, do we really want to get into that if we're not matched up? Like, are we really going to force somebody 240 or whatever it's going to be if in the DNR it's 260? Because, I mean, I think that's why the sheriff won't touch it either.
Yeah, and I think that the important thing to remember is that I would suggest we think about is this motion on the table just gives them a permit for 240 within 300 feet, which is in line with what we told them we were going to do last November. Now, there's nothing to keep the board at our August meeting from coming in and approving a variance. But by doing it at the August meeting, it allows us to follow our process. Mark.
Mechanically, I understand that the next thing we will do is if this motion at the table passes, we would then write up an application, send them an invoice, and they would either pay that invoice accepting the permit or not. Is that?
Well, the permit would be issued. Sherry would issue them a permit and request payment for the 240.
Okay. And last month, we said, come back with an application for 240, we'll approve it. They did not.
True.
And so my inclination is they will not pay that invoice. They will not accept the permit. And we'll be at the same place a month from now as we are right now.
And I think that's a possibility. However, historically, they have paid at least for most of the slips that they've had installed. So historically, that's been how they've acted. But you're right; it's a risk that that they will not do anything.
As they've done nothing for the last 30 days.
Correct.
Given the opportunity to request that permit.
Correct. Alan?
So I'm going to change my mind since we've been talking. I think it's cleaner and better to issue the permit for the 240 and the variance simultaneously. Somebody ask.
Aye.
Thank you. Because I think that to consider a variance, I think you have to have an application for a variance. And I don't think the board can sua sponte or on itself ask for a variance. And so I think it's cleaner to just handle the request, which was $250, that way. Just bifurcate it and do it in one, as opposed to just because I was thinking mechanically, if we're going to do it as a separate thing next month, it implies that someone has made the application for the variance. And I don't think that the board should get in the habit of spontaneously requesting a variance of its own on behalf of someone else. We have what the request was, and you're essentially granting it, but you're doing it through two mechanisms. So the invoice would go out for the $250, and that's what was requested. I think that's what they said they could handle. I don't know if I recall that they didn't say they didn't even had 250 rented, right?
Right. And can I just, what if we address the motion of 240 at 300, and then we inform them that they need to request a variance, and we will take that up at our August meeting. And if they decide, well, we don't really want to play that way, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing, then at that point we could look at enforcement.
Fine, but that's a pretty big mess, I guess, is the way I would look at it. So, you've got what's out there. Let's assume that it's 250, no more than, right?
It's more.
And that's what the application was for. That's actually what the vote was for. So the only thing you're really altering is how to handle those remaining 10 votes. And I just think it'd be cleaner to just do it in one and done, and whatever variance you need for the length of a couple of docks. It sounds like it's all it is, because of the fact that the combined dock doesn't work, right?
Yeah, and how does that impact our process when we don't give adequate notice for exceeding the 300 feet?
Well, you were at over that in the first place, weren't you, when you were considering it last month?
No, we pulled them within 300 feet.
Wouldn't you make the same requirement then?
Could, except that I think Chris made the point, which I think is a good one, that without that shared dock,
it's hard.
It's hard. I think it may not be a reason. Personally, I mean, the way it looks is you can fit maybe 240, 245 slips within their ADUA, just based on the survey done that was performed by Rudd. Mm-hmm. If you look at the number of slips that exceed the 300 foot, it's like in the 15, 16 range, something like that.
Yeah, and honestly, it's new territory for me too, so I can't really give you the best advice, because we're actually talking about asking ourselves how to give a variance to someone who should be asking for it themselves to go over what you were going to permit. Yeah,
and I think that by passing the motion that's on the table, the 240 within 300, and a 30-day grace period to get that done, I think it provides some incentive to them to come with a variance.
Well, if you give the 10 as a variance too, in this motion, and then suggest that you can come back and get a variance for, we'll say, the length, right? Because of the fact that you've lost the combination dock at the north end. So then there's at least a little burden on them to say, and please, could we get a variance from that this year too? And once that application is in, then the neighbors would be able to come in and say whatever they need to say. So we haven't gotten any complaints, right?
My understanding is that we haven't. Chris?
Just the city, that we tried to get polished up.
That was the ADUA
That
line.
wasn't on the length, I don't think, though.
No, right, and that ADUA, that discussion, I think, is over. That line's been set. The city has granted Docks White Bear Lake the ability to use it this year, but not in the future. So I think that issue is settled. Okay, I will amend my motion back to 240 slips and a variance for 10 additional slips to be in line with what they requested at the June meeting, within 300 feet, and that they have a 30-day grace period to make that happen. And Sherry can let them know that if they would like something more than the 10 boat variance, or that they want to exceed the 300, that they can make that variance request, and we'll take it up in August. That's my motion.
I accept your amendment.
Thank you.
The second.
Thank you. So let's have some discussion. Mike?
Quickly, you said slips. Do you mean to say boats?
No, I mean to say slips.
Rental slips.
Okay, that's the motion on the table. We have a second. Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
No.
No.
Okay, we have 3 opposed. The motion passes. Thanks, everybody. Okay, moving on. Shallow water, thank you. Shallow water buoys. We provided in your packet a map that shows where we install buoys with a request that if, as you're using the lake, if you see areas that could use buoys for whatever reason, that you bring that forward to the board.
Just email, or what's the best way?
I would suggest that we use Sherry as central, and so if you
Perfect.
have something, just let Sherry know, like, hey, I noticed this, might be good for a buoy, but give a reasonable location too.
Yep.
Any further discussion on this item? Susie?
I was just wondering, when I made the suggestion for Manitou Marsh in an email, I also included the fact that there were a couple non-eligible, whatever, buoys that were out there. They were like red, a detergent bottle or something that was floating. Were those removed?
I don't know what the status of those are. Does anybody know the status of those? Mike?
Excuse me. There's a couple there's a rock pile there. Not a very big one, maybe 30 rocks, maybe not even that many. Piled up in a pyramid, and you could hit them. The residents know where they are, and they put a green buoy and a red buoy. So if you know your green buoy, you pass on, red buoy, you come back in. And they do it, they've done it for years, as long as I can remember. And it's a good service. Probably the only people that that go in and out of there are fishermen who already know the lake. They're not going to be intimidated by it. And the residents that go out, and the kayakers. You were a kayaker.
No, I wasn't kayaking. I was actually in my pontoon boat.
Okay, all right.
And I had no idea what they were there for other than
Yeah.
they were in
So
the
that's what they're there for. They're doing a good service.
Mike, should we consider,
Removing the rock?
should the Conservation District have buoys out there and relieve the residents of that
For
responsibility?
rocks or for shallow water or for that? I suppose we could. There's 2 more buoys. We're going to have to order more buoys and hire and pay more to have them put out.
Yeah, fair enough,
I mean,
but it's something we could do.
we could do it, yes.
Chris?
What's the definition of a regulation buoy? Do we have anything like that?
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
Is there? Is
Coast
there really?
Guard.
Like, is it like what is it? What is it?
Guard.
Like size and like red,
It's-
yellow? What is it?
blue and white.
No, well, it's red and green, right? Isn't it?
And these are red and
Port
green.
Starboard.
If you go, sorry.
Yeah, Mark, thanks.
So, yeah, there is. If you go, like, my wife's just going through the boating courses right now, and there's a whole section on buoys, and there are red and green ones, and there's white ones, and there's flashing ones, and there's all kinds of different buoys. But red and green is pretty popular. I've been to other lakes that do the same thing.
Was there like sizes and stuff? Like if you had a red and green thing, they're like
They look like kickball size.
Like I've seen the ones in Mille Lacs, they're like sticks. They're
Yeah.
just like red and green sticks with reflectors on it. Like, but we don't. I mean, there's probably multiple. I was just curious if we had like some definition for white bear that said this is a buoy.
Well, there is that definition, and I think we adopted that, or we took some action on that buoys have to meet maybe the Washington County or the Ramsey County. One of the counties has.
Ramsey County authorizes mooring buoys, basically.
Okay, mooring buoys, so different topic.
Navigational buoys.
Okay.
So recommend people just tell the spots, and then we can figure out the buoys. I take it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that's right. Meredith?
So the intention of this is to create something that we could possibly publish every year so that everyone that uses the lake would know what's buoyed off and perhaps why.
So that's that item. Anybody else have anything they want to mention about that?
I guess I was wondering if the district would want to take on the idea of removing those rocks, so those buoys would not be necessary.
Are the rocks there naturally?
I don't know. Mike, are those rocks there naturally?
Good question.
I mean, if they're piled up, it wouldn't seem like a natural occurrence to me, but, maybe somebody at one time
I mean, there's no
piled them up.
rocks anywhere else. There's just those rocks.
Yeah.
Nice little round ones, all about that size. Who knows?
All right, well,
It'd be nice if you could just pluck them out of there and
Pick 'em out.
go on, but
Need a DNR permit.
you better check with the DNR first.
okay, so let's leave that for now, and we can bring that up in the future if when we have more buoy discussion. If everybody's okay with that. Okay. Meeting with member communities. So I would request that we all meet with our member communities, request to get onto their agenda and go out and talk to them about what the board's doing, ask them if they have any questions about the board activities. Scott and Mike did this with the City of White Bear, which Scott will report on, and that I think is very successful. Diane and I have done that with the township prior to COVID, but once COVID hit, that all kind of went away, but we can re-up that. But I would suggest that each of us takes the time and, to go with your partner, or whoever you are with your city, and make time to go out and talk with your councils. Mark?
Just information. So I came up for another 3 years. I was in front of the city and basically did that 2-3 months ago for Matamidi. But Matamidi's meetings are they're 7 o'clock on the third Tuesdays. So that would require one of us not to be here. But I've already been there this year.
And that sounds great.
Matamidi.
That sounds great. But I think just annually, if we could make time, maybe at the December, that I think that'd be valuable. Okay, that's the request. Any further discussion on that? Okay, thank you. Next item, part-time temporary office help. I think there are some, let's call it chores that could be accomplished by somebody, a temporary worker, that would make Sherry's life easier and would accelerate progress down in that room. And I'd like to get the board's feel for what they think about trying to find somebody to come in maybe 4 hours a week, for as many weeks as Sherry needs them. And Sherry, do you have an idea of what that would look like?
I've only thought of the projects or tasks. One of it would be that the office downstairs needs to be redone. I mean, it's in bad shape, and so that extra person could help me with that. There are a variety of publications on a shelf and studies that are disorganized that we could go through that to see what we can keep and not keep, and that would help me decide what other kind of office things I need to get to store the things that we have. The person could also help with putting together or go through some of the files. We have still boxes of old files that need to be organized. I think 4 hours a week would definitely be helpful, and especially I can really organize kind of getting that space in shape if somebody else is there to help me with that.
Chris?
Is it for a long duration, or what are you thinking?
No, maybe just the summer or into September maybe, and that would be it, hopefully.
So would you, we're thinking high school kids, I take it, or something like that, or what?
If
Student?
somebody knew somebody that doesn't have overly amount of skills, but
somebody who could take direction and you could
take
yell at them
direction, I would definitely be there to have to supervise them.
Got it. All for it.
So I'll just get us started. I'll make a motion to to set aside in the budget or to authorize to spend, I guess. Let's see, 20, if it's, oh, geez. If it's, 4, 8, 12, 16, so let's say 16 hours a month at 20, what's that, $320 a month, if it's $20 an hour. And so here's really what I'll make the motion now. I'll make a motion that we authorize spending up to $500 a month to hire somebody to come in and assist Sherry for 3 months. At Sherry's discretion.
Second.
We have motion and a second. So some discussion. Does that seem adequate, everybody? Okay,
How
sure.
would you find somebody? Would you go through office temps or something?
Well, I think there are a couple of ways. I think that some of us may know people that could help in this situation, and we could approach them and ask them to just express their interest in the position. I don't think we're looking for a specific skill set. I think that we all appreciate the work that Sherry does, and so we're probably not going to ask somebody that would be problematic to apply if we're requesting people, unless we want to make Sherry's life miserable, which we don't. So I think it would just be us going word of mouth to people that we might know, and then ask them to apply.
I mean, hiring's not simple. I mean,
Maybe that we do that between now and the August meeting, and everything comes up dry, and then at that point, then we may have to figure out something different. But that would be how I would approach it, just out of the chute. Mark.
Would we have a requirement to post that position?
Board, I don't think so, because it's literally just a few hours, just administrative help. So there would be no benefits. There would be nothing. So I assume it's 1099, or would it be a W-2 position?
I don't know, Alan. What would you advise? Or
I don't do that, so I don't offer that advice.
Sure.
You threw it out there to spend this
I'll look
money.
into
So
it.
What?
I'll look into it. I'll
Okay.
talk to the city. They may have more information, or the IRS.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to expend the funds. Any further discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, that passes. Okay, unfinished business, VFW expansion of and the EAW associated with that. So we've done a little looking into that situation, and Alan, I'll need your input here. But here's my understanding, is that because this is a mandatory EAW, that we are the entity that will submit that EAW to be published. And what we do with the applicant is we ask them to provide information so that we can fully complete the application form. Now, to date, Mike Meredith and myself have gone through the EAW, and there are some deficiencies with the information that's been provided to the board in that EAW. And so we will summarize those deficiencies, send those to the applicant, and let them know that there are some holes that they need to fill. And now the critical thing, I think, is once the applicant provides the information that we request, we have a window of 30 days, if I understand it correctly, to get that published. And I think the reason that that's in place is so that an entity like us doesn't just slow walk it once the applicant's done all their work. And once the application is complete, that we don't slow walk it, that we get it turned in. So that's information So the intent is that we will summarize all of the deficiencies that we've noted, and we'll alert the applicant. I think that what would be good is if anybody's interested in reading that EAW information, if you want to review that and advise Sherry of any deficiencies you see, then that would be appropriate. But I would suggest that you need to do that probably within the next 2 weeks. And, okay, Chris?
I don't want to drain it, but can you give me, what were some of the examples? Were they like simple things? I take it these are things they can figure out and get done, or are they really big gaps?
No, I don't think they're big gaps, but it's things like, they've noted in the information that they provided that this is a discretionary EAW that the proposer initiated, and that's not correct. It's actually a mandatory EAW.
Cleanup type stuff you're thinking?
That's what I think.
Okay, perfect.
That's what I think I've found so far. And some of the answers, at least one of them was kind of flip, and I think that it would be good to, to try to get them to give us a serious response in some cases.
That's fair.
Okay, and I don't think, do we need any board action on that at the moment, Alan?
I think you've made a request for comments from the rest of the board.
True.
And so I think you should tell them what your plan is to get those out then. Within the next 30 days, you want to send a letter?
What I would like is us to formulate our responses and to provide those to the applicant. And do we need board approval for that?
Probably should.
Okay, so then the plan would be that each of us would provide any input within the next 2 weeks. Prior to the next meeting, there would be a document that would be included in the board packet that would summarize the deficiencies, and we would take some action on that at the August meeting. And assuming that the board was okay with those items, we would submit them to the applicant, and it would be in their hands to provide that information.
Yeah, and give them like 30 days to fill that hole.
Right, so we could put a little time limit on that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, any questions on that, Darren?
Can the list of found deficiencies be shared?
Yeah, good.
So
good.
We don't have to double up?
Yep. So what I will do is I will summarize the deficiencies that we've seen so far, but I'll need a little time for that. So I will do that within a week. And I'll send that to Sherry, and Sherry can distribute it so everybody can see what's been identified to date. Any further discussion on that? All right. And Sherry, will you hold me to that? Thank you. The 2024 draft permit application, Form 5, and license fee schedule, Chris.
I'll try to make it quick. So I think Darren, Luke, Mike gave some first inputs on the forms. Sherry and I did another little pass on it. There were some simple cleanup things, and then we had a good discussion at the LUC on how we count certain things on the commercial permit compared to the residential. And I think the big thing that came out of that is we are going to count slips within commercial bay, which would include, anything, any mooring of a boat that's long term, any of those, slides that we pull up on the docks. So we're going to get that verbiage and definition, and we'll share it with you guys so you can review that. And then any other cleanup stuff, and they're minor, where we really want the diagrams to come out in these permits as the thing that tells us where everything is. So proper labels, distances for property lines, some of those other things. We're going to get clarity on that, and we'll try to get that this week where we can share it with you guys, and then hopefully next month we can just vote on it, approve it. If there's any other revisions, give them to us, right? I'm sure we can work through it on emails, but it's very close. Sherry's done a very good job with it, so appreciate all your help, and we're trying to just get it wrapped up. If we can get it wrapped up by next month, I think then everybody can use it.
And the intent is to use that for the 2024 operating season?
Correct.
Okay, and I'll just remind everybody that if there's an email that includes a quorum of board members, that we cannot have discussion via email. on issues.
Can I ask a question then? If we send these out for revised, should we just say give feedback to Sherry, please? Or if Sherry can send it out and then get feedback?
Yes, I would suggest that that's the way it's handled, is that if anybody has input, don't respond to the group, just send them directly to Sherry.
And we'll put that in the mail then. Perfect. Awesome. But that's the update. It's coming along finally. So
thanks for all your efforts.
It's all Sherry.
And, well, the people involved. Okay, executive committee, that's me. So the executive committee met. We discussed the DNR and the updated commercial bay permits, which we've had some discussion on tonight. We discussed enforcement in commercial bay, which we've discussed tonight, the EAW for the VFW. We discussed the issue of 479 and 483 Lake Avenue briefly. We discussed briefly the aeration for ice control, and that DNR permits are required for that. Some people include bubblers over the winter to prevent the formation of ice. So we had some discussion about that and the idea that the board ought to have copies of those DNR permits in our files so that we know who has made application and that all of that is in line. We also discussed the idea of notifying dock owners when their docks are going to be considered or are going to be on the LUC agenda. The idea being that if Joe complains about Bill's dock, that both Joe and Bill should be advised that the LUC is going to be considering this, so they have an opportunity to attend and offer input. We discussed the ordinance review work that Meredith is and the group of volunteers there are undertaking. We discussed providing a letter to marina operators regarding excess boat slips and how that would be handled in the future. And that specifically is that, hey, we have this ordinance that if you exceed your boat slips, you're reduced by that many in the future 2 years. And we just want to kind of formalize that and let them know that we are going to enforce that provision of our ordinance. And then St. Germain Bay sign, we discussed briefly a status update, and that was basically it. Any questions on any of that? Okay. Next is Lake Quality Committee. Mike?
The lake level today is 922.61. 922.61. That's just a little bit less than 6 inches lower than last month. But it's been, as you all know, it's been really dry. A little bit of rain in the forecast for the next few days. We'll see what happens. But we're still there, still above 922 considerably. The lake temperature, water temperature, is 74 degrees. Last month it was 77, so you can tell these cold nights, it makes a difference. But it's still pretty comfortable. The lake survey, the lake treatment was today. They were out there at 9 o'clock this morning. They worked till almost 2:30 or 3. We came up with 47.67 acres. You've got a map there to show you. All the boxes are the places that were treated.
Mike, can you repeat that acreage?
Pardon?
Can you repeat the acreage?
The acres, 47.67.
Thank you.
And this map is in your board information. What isn't in your board information is how much that's going to cost us. And I used Triclopure, which was the less expensive of the two, and we've used Triclopure before, and it's been very effective. The really expensive one just wasn't in the budget. 47 acres at $653, we come to $31,128.51. So we're under budget by $500-600, or at least what we proved with our grant. So we're in good shape, got the money to do it. Treatment was today. It will take a maximum of 2 weeks before it'll be gone or down. They looked at doing it last week, but the weather wasn't right. It was windy or wasn't conducive. Today was absolutely a perfect day to apply an application for Eurasian water milfoil. No wind and sunny. So they definitely they follow the GPS road, and they definitely got everything in the right place. And with the sun, and again tomorrow more sun, the weed will grow. It'll take it in, and should have a good treatment. Any questions?
Thank you, Mike. Lake Utilization Committee, Mark.
4955 Lake Avenue debris. We're going to send them a letter. A lot of it is from the pictures. I haven't been down there in a month, but a lot of it is some of it is logs. They look like they're cut, which should be removed. But then as far as like the scrub in the lake, if we want to pay to have that done, but we're going to send a letter either way to the property owner saying that any debris that comes off of their old dock needs to be removed. That's the other stuff that's being complained about. I don't know what we can do about it. Like I said, it's terrestrial growing in the water. It can be removed without a DNR permit, but you can't force anybody to do it. Any questions on that?
We were also going to follow up with a call to Mark Christensen, who's like the caretaker of the place, his brother. So we'll call him too.
Yep. Jensen Rundalab, that's pretty much been taken care of for this year. I guess markers were put out today so they can figure out where to put the dock next year. But this year, both parties had agreed it can stay where it currently is.
And we'll get that with Robert Jensen and Rindalab. We'll figure out how we coordinate that. So Robert's going to show us, and then we can show Rindalab so it gets done right.
As far as 479 and 43 Lake Avenue, the LUC decided, what was the exact verbiage? That wasn't...
it was...
not excessive, reasonable.
Unreasonable. It was
not unreasonable for 483 to get in and out of that area. We're going to send another letter, basically almost like the one we sent in 2017. The dock at 483 is not moved. They haven't done anything different. They haven't changed any boats. So the agreement still should stand. Let's see. Residential docks with excess boats. I was supposed to put out letters this month. I had a little medical issue, so I didn't. But tomorrow, we have a draft going out to the 4 properties that have excess of 4 boats on their dock. Tally's dock navigation issues. Basically, that's for Steve Smith is the complainant and had a picture of 3 pontoons tied up. And from now on, I think this was discussed earlier that they just need to call 911, ask for non-emergency water patrol, and for a site visit, and they can tell them to untie and go somewhere else. And then Commercial Bay boat count process, we're going to find out when the sheriff, if they have gone out there or not, advise them to count slips, not boats. And we'll also do a flyover and a boat count or a slip count in that aspect as well. And any other questions?
Okay, thank you, Mark. Lake Education Committee, Scott?
Yeah, no real updates. We're continuing to put in a page per issue of the Laker. And I think the total of 4 issues they're doing over the summer. And we will expect some summary of where they are distributing. Apparently it's showing up in periodontist offices and all kinds of places.
Good.
And any social media update, Meredith?
Okay, so this month on our social media, I'm going to get the temperature and lake level up as usual. I'm going to refresh on some summer boating rules. I didn't get anything up last month on the marsh, but I'm going to get to it this month. And I'm going to remind people about pumping water from the lake, that it's illegal at this level. And if anyone wants anything posted, I'm happy to do it.
Did we find somebody who's pumping? Or was it just a reminder?
It's a reminder.
Got it.
Okay, any questions for Scott or Meredith? And Scott, did you want to talk about your meeting with the City of White Bear or not?
I don't want to go into as much detail because it's a long meeting, but they asked us to present the budget. And Mike did a very good job of talking what's in the budget, particularly the lake study and things with the EWM control. And we got some questions about invasives. The only thing related specifically to the budget is that Councilmember Edberg requested that we provide a recent balance sheet and income statement along with the budget's submission so they can evaluate our finances. Something that Edberg likes. When I presented what we're doing in the LEC, and everybody sort of nodded, yeah, this is great. Councilmember Jones said he didn't like the leading line in our Laker section, which read information for lakeshore property owners, boaters, and lake visitors. He said the value of the information is broader than that. Scott explained that press publication distributes as broadly as possible to support their advertising. But Jones said the leading line may be off-putting and dissuade others from reading it. Scott said, thanks for the feedback.
Good.
And then before I left the podium, Councilmember Walsh asked about this business of Mike and I abstaining on one of those votes.
The ADUA line between.
Yeah, the ADUA line. And, it's so complicated. I didn't, so they asked, well, what's our policy on abstaining? And I said, well, we follow Robert's Rules of Order, and that if there is ever a personal conflict, that the voting member should abstain. And I gave the example of how I abstain every year when the permit for my association comes up. And then, but what they were trying to get to is they had read this whole thing in the press about how we had abstained on that vote. And I said, well, we did that on the advice of council. And then there was a little bit, well, we disagree with what council told you. And anyway, and I say, we have a responsibility to represent the city's position on votes. And I noted that this is the only time in the 11 years I've been on the board anything like that has happened. So I am not too terribly concerned about it.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. Next, Treasury Report, Mike.
We got a thank you letter from the Fireworks Committee, signed by Dick Galena and Bill Foussard, for our donation. I hope you all enjoyed the fireworks. July Treasurer's Report is in front of you. Any questions on anything? That's good. I'd like to make a motion to approve debit card purchases number 8, 9, and 10. I would also like to, part of the motion, to approve the bank service charge, because we probably don't have a choice there. I would also like approval for checks number 4875 through 4883. Also, the next check is voided, so the final check I'm asking approval for is 4885.
Second.
Second, thank you.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Any questions for Mike? All right, thank you, Mike. Board council report. Alan?
It was obviously a busy month thanks to the 4th of July. Before we met with the sheriff, I did talk to our sergeant, our water patrol sergeant, Mr. Timbago. He said they were out and the conservation officers were out, and it was just any of you who were out probably made the same observations, and so a lot of safety checks, and I haven't seen any citations come in, but it was busy but well behaved is the way it was described, so that's good. I was hoping to get information about the slip counts, because that's what we especially contracted this year, to have an extra patrol to do, and that was a call I made before the meeting, but didn't get a call back from Mr. Timbago, so I hope to have that information next month. I assume that just by consensus we'll want to have some drone pictures of Commercial Bay between now and next month.
I think it would be good to get a shot of Commercial Bay in July. I also think it'd be good, personally, to get another shot in August. I think it's beneficial to have a couple of views on a couple of different days.
Okay.
If you're able to do that.
What I've been trying to do is to get out essentially before everyone goes out in the morning, but it's been remarkably windy at the height where I have to get to with the drone, and that, I'll just say, makes it difficult. So there obviously isn't much business there, but once the sun gets to a certain point in the sky, it becomes really hard to navigate because I just lose sight of it because it's up 400 feet in the sky. So I try to get out when the sun's low and I can still see the craft. So hopefully get them done. So once I get them, I'll send them to Sherry, and you guys can see what's going on down there. And most of the slips should be full unless someone toodles off and doesn't come back at night. At least when I've gone out early day, they're usually pretty full. So stay tuned. I would stand for questions.
Any questions for Alan?
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Announcements. Sherry, do you have anything?
So I don't think we're going to have a photo tonight.
It wasn't on the agenda.
I would like to ask if it's okay, seeing that we have those pictures for the press, if we use those instead. We are going to be getting, as I mentioned, email addresses for the White Bear Lake Conservation District. Is it okay if we just use your pictures instead of trying to get a group photo, because we've tried so many times?
Well, when I saw the agenda, I figured the last thing people would want to do, we're probably getting done about on time from what I thought, would be to sit around for an hour and do more pictures. So it was just a packed summer of stuff. So
right,
yep.
And it may continue. So
which photos are you advocating?
Those are the ones that are in the Laker. I got pictures from everybody to put in there, and so it would be the same pictures. Individual pictures, and then I could then put your email address underneath that and your city that you represent.
And does anybody have any concerns about that?
Email addresses?
As I mentioned, everybody is going to get a White Bear Lake Conservation District email address, because as a government official, you need to have access to the public. Public has to have access to you. So those that don't have addresses, some of you already have them. Most people don't. So I'm working on that between now and the next meeting. So that's one thing. Just want to let you know also that the next meeting of the LUCN board is going to be August 15th. I do want to let you know that I am going on vacation. I've told the executive committee, but I changed the dates a little bit, and that's going to be from August 18th to the 28th, so that's 10 days. I will have limited internet access, so I don't know if I need to work with some of you to take care of some things. I haven't thought that far, but I can, hopefully get a hold of some things. So the office will be closed August 21st to the 28th. And it's just 2 office hours, August 22nd and August 24th, that I won't be here. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Enjoy your holiday.
Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second. We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion passes. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.